like to take some time now to discuss some of the key lessons learned under our Conservation Agriculture Regional Program. The design phase all started with carefully choosing our partners that we were going to work with in the field. We were looking for local partners who had a good sense of the smallholder agricultural sectors in their respective countries, and who had a track record of working with smallholder farmers in those countries as well. This actually led us to choosing more smaller local entities, homegrown entities in these countries. The big challenge was always obviously getting them to up to a management and training, technical training capacity that they would then be able to handle both their programs and also offer to the farmers the high quality caliber technical training services and support that we needed them to do. The second lesson learned was the amount of time it was going to take to get these entities up to the capability levels that we required. And this required a lot of in-house, in-field coaching and feedback and support on the part of myself and our senior agricultural technical advisor, Mr. Vince Hodson. The other thing that needed to be done, and this is always a problem, is the ensuring that field officers are not just technically savvy, but are also capable of delivering that technical message and know-how in a manner that is more conducive to training adults. And so it requires an approach that they've never been used to. They've always been educational systems where rote learning is the norm and not the exception. And the same for farmers. So giving them not just the technical knowledge, but also how to deliver that knowledge, that really requires quite a lot of time, and it requires people who know how to train in a participatory manner that effectively engages farmers and not just shows them how to do things, but also gets those farmers understanding why they have to do a particular thing for their own benefit, so they take ownership of it, and then you then have a better chance of them trying the practice out and then expanding if it works for them. We focused a lot on engaging policymakers, and aside from involving the Ministry of Agricultural field extension officers in each of these countries in our training and field days, this meant, though, that we had to have concrete, on-the-ground examples of what was working. Part of the design of the program was the creation of these, what were called Conservation Agriculture National Task Force. And what was expected of them was probably not going to happen, which was they would act as this kind of nascent middleman type structure committee, which would then get policymakers at the Ministry of Ag and perhaps maybe across a couple other ministries engaged and excited about what was going on in the field. That really was asking these nascent, inexperienced task force to do something they really didn't have the capability to do, nor did they have the kind of authority with which to push that type of engagement through. And as a result, their kind of, what they achieved at the end was pretty limited. If we were to do another phase, we probably would not use these types of structures, and we just do a direct engagement through the Ministry of Agriculture to policymakers. And this is what happened in those countries, especially in Uganda, where interest went to the highest levels in government. In the development sector, there's always this kind of focus on gender and according women equal opportunities to training and field days and whatever else activities a program is carrying out in the field. I mean, for us, we decided in an early stage what were going to be the concrete things we could do to engage women. And those things really were starting with their male counterparts, their husbands, their brothers, and emphasizing the importance of engaging their wives and their daughters who were going to be involved in farming operations, to get them to come to training and field days so these women could assist, could help with key farm operations, and also would then have the knowledge and the technical expertise to carry these out if by any event, their male counterparts were not available at that time to do a particular farming operation. We also focused on women-only farmer groups, where they tend to be able to voice their opinions and have a more open atmosphere for their own learning. And we also tried to keep training groups down to a number of between 15 and 25. Well, our experience has shown that when the numbers go beyond that, women tend to get lost in those large numbers, and their male counterparts tend to be the ones who are answering questions, who are asking questions, who are taking the lead on technical practicals and so on. During the course of the CARP, we run a lot of technical training on the safe and correct use of herbicides. Farmers use these products are available. They often have never been trained on how to correctly and safely use them. It creates all kinds of problems for them. There's a lot of misconceptions around herbicide use and herbicides. But due to the fact that they use them, we have a responsibility and obligation to make sure that they use them safely and correctly. And when they're done in that manner, farmers can reap tremendous benefits in terms of time savings and in terms of lower costs. One lady I was talking to, for example, her and her 2 older children, they used to do the weeding. Their weeding season would be 6 days a week, 5 hours a day, would start around mid-December, and it would end around mid-March. As a result of this, those children were always going to school late, probably very tired, since the weeding would begin about between 5 and 6 a.m. in the morning and then finish up around 11 a.m. After the herbicide training, her and her husband were able to apply what they had learned, and they've cut their whole weeding operation down to about 2 days in that period. It's a significant time savings. The kid's now able to get to school on time, and with the extra time, she's also been able to open up a shop down the road from their farm, and creating another income-generating stream into that household. Sometimes be accused of being a bit too dogmatic in our technical approach, and that's correct. Conservation farming and farming in general, it's a technology, it's a set of practices, and they're only as good as the way they're applied. Flying is an example of this, and pretty much every human endeavor. You do it correctly, you get this result. You don't do it correctly, you get a different result. So this is different from options, and it's also different from getting farmers to participate in their training. But once a farmer chose a particular practice, whether it be the hose CF, animal draft CF, or a mechanized CF practice, then it was non-negotiable. They were trained on how to do it properly, and it was expected that they would do it properly. And as a lead farmer once told me, don't blame the bicycle if you fall off the bicycle. And this is very true. We had to emphasize with them that they were either going to do it correctly, or we were not going to be interested in working with them. The last thing we did, but one of the first things we did in the field before we started technical training, was actually to lay out the groundwork of what the program was what our roles and responsibilities were to them, to farmers who were interested in working with us as a program, what they could expect from us. But also we emphasized, we expected certain things from them, and that these things were also non-negotiable. For me, it created more of a business-like atmosphere and relationship between us and the farmers who were interested in taking a look at the practices and then adopting them. So a much more equal playing ground for everyone that you would get with a normal business contract, I suppose. And it set the stage, and it made sure that everyone was on the same page. The expectations revolving around getting handouts were not there, because we were not going to do that, and that was made clear right from the start.